What was your biggest crap, no going back now moment? This one is quite literally a not going back moment. As a Boy Scout at summer camp, we would always take large group hikes on the last day of camp. This particular camp in West Texas was located in the middle of a deep canyon and cut through with a small stream. The day before our hike day it rained a bit, but not too much to make us worry. It was drizzling in the morning when we got up, but we were Boy Scouts, so that obviously didn't stop us. So our long hike had us cross the small stream up the canyon maybe 10-15 times, no problem, and everything went great. After a while we get to a medium-sized pond that we all decided to go swimming in. That was fun and we all had a blast. We get out and dressed and we keep going farther up a hill to continue our hike. We get to the top and we hear this wonderfully ominous rushing noise. We look over a ledge and see that the water in the stream was moving a bit faster than we remembered. A friend and I volunteer to go back and see what's happened. A flash flood had ripped through the area we had just left moments before. The water in the pond was at least 7 feet higher than it was 5 minutes before, and it was covered in foam and rapidly overflowing. We decided as a group to test our luck and go back to see if we could get out, but the last stream crossing had turned into a very fast moving river crossing. Needless to say, we were fricked. We literally couldn't go back, and we had to wait a long time to get help and get to the now almost flooded camp. Happened to a friend of mine in Philmont. He went to the bathroom and had to cross a small stream to get there. The sky opened up for a few minutes and he still hadn't come back. We heard yelling a little later and he was stuck because that small stream had quadrupled in size and was now a raging river. When I was younger, letting my older cousin talk me into a canoe ride down a flooded river. We'd planned it days in advance, but there was a lot of heavy rain in the area and the normally calm river was near flood level and quite rough. I really didn't want to do it, but I didn't want to let him down either, so I still went. I knew as soon as we saw the river this was a terrible idea. The whole thing was a crap show and I honestly thought we were going to die. We had no control and at one point we got stuck nose down under a large rock. Knowing if we tipped out we were drowning, we somehow made it out into the shore where we walked back with the canoe. Stepping off that sandbar I could barely reach to swim out to the girl caught in a riptide, and not knowing how a riptide worked, it took what felt like hours, but spoiler alert, we made it. Too early in the season for lifeguards. I remember calling out to people walking their dogs on the beach, but we were so far out they didn't even look towards us. I'm sure she is eternally grateful that you took that step. I hopped a freight train once. At the moment it hits 15-20 miles per hour, you're just along for the ride. But the real no going back moment came when the train stopped on a siding outside Winnemucca. After waiting there for like 5 hours, I decided to walk into town and get some ice cream sandwiches. As soon as I got 50 yards from the train, I realized, if it starts rolling now, I'll be too far away to chase it down. I'll just be stuck in this town for a while. For you kids out there, riding freight trains is dangerous and illegal, and dirty and loud and unreliable. Don't do it. Also, I should point out that Winnemucca is home to some of America's best Basque restaurants, fantastic cowboy heritage sites, and it's the gateway to the Black Rock Desert. It's got something for everyone, not just stranded hobos. There's definitely no going back from Winnemucca. When I was about to get on the plane to my first semester of med school, my dad, never one for sentiment, said, "Well, you're now actually worth more dead than alive. Don't screw this up." The feeling when the plane takes off, knowing there's no turning back, it all depends on you. A scary feeling that is. While motorcycling through Vietnam it was getting late and I was running low on fuel, too low to turn back to the previous town. If that wasn't bad enough, my bike rack broke. Luckily, a kind man and his daughter stopped to help. He knew no English outside of "I can fix," so I followed him. I wore my bags and held the rest in my lap. Entering the town, my jaw dropped. It was complete calamity. The streets were filled with people carrying 2x4s, rocks and bottles. Literally hundreds of people. It was like a war zone, with people smashing scooters and cars on fire, people yelling and fighting. A few individuals were running for their lives with mobs in tail. I can still vividly see one man's face as he looked over his shoulder in dread. There were too many people to drive through, so I had to slow down to a crawl. All I kept thinking was, please don't notice me. Please don't rob me and smash my face in. Please know I'm with this kind man and his daughter. The moment lengthened as a few of the town folk started to notice me. I was scared shitless but produced a warm smile. The smile wasn't returned. The kind man looked back and those who were taking interest in me noticed. Can't help but think it helped. We finally breached the throng of people and pulled down an alleyway to his place. I still didn't feel safe, but I needed gas and my rack fixed. I tried to ask the man why all these people were fighting one another. He just smiled and made the drink gesture. It was during Tet, or the Vietnamese New Year. He fixed my rack, gave me some gas and wouldn't take any money as payment. However, like Christmas, the kids receive money, so I gave his daughter a fat wad of cash. With his blessing. About 45 minutes later I arrived safely at my hostel in Nirvana. Getting in the ambulance after suffering a grand mal seizure from alcohol withdrawals. When I finally said enough is enough and decided I needed to quit drinking before it killed me, I thought I could detox on my own as I was terrified of hospitals. I was wrong. I spent a week detoxing in the ICU, and now, almost a full year later, I'm still very happily sober and I'm completely thriving. I've witnessed 2 friends seize from alcohol withdrawals. It's crazy. One of my friends fell back into alcohol and nearly died from liver failure. Through some sort of a miracle he survived and is doing well. I can remember having what was supposed to be our last conversation on the phone. He wasn't supposed to make it through the weekend. Good job. I'm happy for you. Last summer I replaced my roof. Standing on the ladder at the corner of the house with the shingle stripping shovel, I just stood there for 5 minutes thinking if I wanted to do this or not. Then I ripped off the first few shingles, and there was no going back. Did this last October as well. I knew it was about to get cold but our roof might not last the winter. I've never shingled before but a friend came to help. That was a terrifying 2 days, haha. Mountain biking with some friends on a new trail, which wasn't even a bike trail. We hiked most of the way up since it was too steep to ride up, carried our bikes all the way up, rested at the top for a bit and then rolled over the edge. I remember as my front tire crested and gravity started taking over I thought, there's no way I'm stopping now, unless a tree stops me. I know a similar feeling. I was mountain biking too and out of some really dumb instinct I pulled the front brake way too hard. It wasn't my bike so I didn't know it well. Luckily I didn't break anything but when I started taking off it was a really bad feeling. I ran away from an abusive home at 19. I called my dad while I was at work later that day to let him know I was okay and not to come looking for me. He's a narcissist and I was so scared he'd tell the authorities something crazy so they'd track me down for him. Like my boyfriend had kidnapped me. I'd left my car keys on the kitchen table, so he couldn't charge me with stealing it, as he bought it for me, emptied my bank account, because he was friends with the small bank owner, and taken everything I could with me and that was a pretty big one. He said you'll never make it without me and my money and I just said I can't wait to find out. That was 7 years ago now, and I'm making it. You better be making it. Proud of you. When my abusive husband was doing his weekly ritual of interrogating me and accusing me of some made up infidelity and goes, well, what's the deal here? Are we just done? Before I could stop myself I was like yeah, we're done. He didn't know, until that moment, that I had already spoken to a divorce lawyer and the police and had all my ducks in a row to take the frick off. But I was planning on actually meeting with the lawyer before I told him. So then it was 2 weeks of awful Jekyll and Hyde bulls before I could leave. I have to say, even though I was like oh crap, it did feel so fricking good to say it though. Frick that guy. Amen, frick that guy. Glad you got out. I made a budget yesterday to figure out how much I'd need to move out. If I work 2 more hours than planned to start a job I've lined up, I could do it easily, with all the optional expenses. That's when it hit me that I'm not in college anymore and I actually could have the money to live independently. One piece of advice, build up some savings before you move out, like 3-6 months of rent savings. Hiking backcountry snowboarding with a guy. Got stuck in a flat area and needed to hike out in deep powder. It was getting dark and kept coming out of thick trees to 50-foot plus cliff areas. It was getting darker and we didn't have much light left and finally came out to another cliff area with about a 10-foot cliff. 20 feet of landing and then a second 10-foot cliff area that had a narrow landing to an open glade. It was either go for it and don't fall and get hurt, or start making a snow tunnel and get ready to sleep on the mountain for the night at East Vale Chutes in Colorado. We both made it through the cliff jumps safely, but it was sketchy. When we got to town we both had a couple tall whiskeys and the first bar we got to and I was still shaking. Could have possibly died if we had to stay on the mountain overnight or got seriously hurt and then died. Making the jumps to get to an area we could get down as it was getting dark, but it was either jump or start making a snow shelter. We were definitely not prepared with backcountry gear and got lost in the area, even though we had both ridden it a few times with some experienced people who had taken us down before. Scary and something I will never forget. That feeling of being in the mountains when it's getting dark and being far away from shelter is a truly unique style of terrifying. I was in a similar situation once. Here, try this hot wing. Took a bite and for the next 18 hours, I could only focus on how this was a crime against humanity. And for those now asking, it was the last dab XXX on a drumstick. It was coated all over. I just ate one big bite, and then I went and shoved my head under a cold shower. Then, it was bed and bathroom for several hours as I threw up most of it, but some got digested. I knew going it that it was gonna be hot. My former roommate was a hot sauce aficionado. He never once handed me a wing that was less than a habanero sauce. The question was, am I about to have Ghost, Pepper X, Carolina Reaper, habanero, etc. The next day was a crime against lavatories. Moving 1,500 miles away with 2 weeks worth of grocery money and a 1-star hotel confirmation that would last 1 month to hold me over until I started making some money. Got a general anesthetic for wisdom teeth removal. After waiting what felt like an eternity in a little prep room, I was just thinking about using the restroom just for something to do when I'm swarmed by nurses or whatever. Before I could react, they stuck things all over me and one of them got the drugs in me and I could immediately feel effects. I remember vividly thinking, well frick, no going back now, as they wheeled me to theater. And then the procedure and recovery went as smoothly as they could have gone. When I decided to venture alone on a hiking trail through the Brazilian rainforest, realized there was no phone coverage after half an hour, kept walking for another hour, and finally saw a sign of civilization. A literal sign. Just that. It said beware of coral snakes. Yeah, well, they're shady AF, looking all innocent like a king snake. A bit dark, but when I took a bunch of pills in a suicide attempt, it was around 10 PM on a Tuesday night and I had just gotten into an argument with my mom. I laid down in my bed and thought about my life. Considered asking my mom to take me to the hospital, but decided against it. I thought, well, this is it. I'm dying. Then I fell asleep. I took more than the lethal dose of Seroquel XR but somehow woke up in the morning, slow, but perfectly fine. I consider it a glitch in the matrix, but one I am grateful for. This was in August 2019, and I'm doing a lot better now. Still struggling, but not suicidal. Well, that sounds rough, but for whatever reason you made it here and we're glad to have you aboard. Keep strong. 1. When my wife showed me the positive pregnancy test while we were already in the process of adopting. 2. When the ultrasound tech said, and here's the second heartbeat. Hiking. Knowing that severe weather is on the way, I got about 8 miles in when it started. Dense woods, but rain was heavy enough that I couldn't see 10 feet in front of me. Crossed a small creek halfway through, which on my way back turned into a river from flash floods. I found a somewhat large rock sticking out from a hill and huddled under that for about 15 minutes while lightning struck close enough to hurt my ears and seriously rumble in my chest. Ended up having to follow the creek upstream until it got small enough to cross, which turned what was originally 2 miles of hiking trail into probably another 8 through raw forest. Maybe more, as it was pitch black when I got back to my car, and I had started at noon. Spent those hours bawling my eyes out and slipping in muddle mayo. Easily in the top 5 most terrifying experiences in my life. One of the first things I learned about hiking is not to leave the trail to try to find a better route. It's safer to wait it out. You get hurt on the trail, the S&R finds you quickly. You get hurt off the trail several miles upstream, S&R finds you dead 2 weeks later. The positive pregnancy test. We were trying, but seeing the test my first thought was honestly, oh crap, what have we done? He's now 8 months old and it is the best, but still the scariest decision we ever made. Giving my notice to my boss last Friday. I'm across the country from many friends and family, and I have no job lined up. If I stay here I'll wind up a shell of a person. So I'm quitting and moving back home with only my savings and the grace of my family to catch me. No going back now. Wish me luck. Signing the lease to an apartment with my long distance girlfriend. Moving 6 hours away from home. It's relatively not that bad, but no matter the outcome my life won't be the same after this. When a guy kissed me for the first time after bar hopping with his friends, I knew I was in trouble. It's been 3 years now and he's snoring next to me. When I called my roommate to see and she overheard me and said, "What did you just call me?" and I was like, crap, now I have to own it. I said, "You're a freaking C." I try to live by the theory of never say something to someone about someone else you wouldn't say to their face, which has unfortunately led to some intense comments. When I asked my crush if she is ready for a relationship with me, the 2 hours I waited for a reply took forever. Also sadly she said no. Just to clarify, I really had tough feelings for her and every time we spoke I thought that there was something. After literally 1 whole year I finally asked her, like an idiot, on WhatsApp that question. She said no sorry and I said that it was okay and dumb for me to ask and she said sorry again. I told her that I don't want this anyone to know. Well crap. Here I am on Reddit, and pretend like this never happened. After that I didn't feel empty or some other stuff. I just felt that everything that I built up to this moment was for nothing. Thanks though for the support. BTW, I know that it was stupid and like a child would do, but I didn't know better. Now I do and I'm starting to get again feelings for her. Maybe let's see how the second try is. Hey bro, it's better to have a crack at it and fail than to just sit in limbo. At least you had the bollocks to try and now you know. It's much better to know than to look back in the future and wonder what if. Silver lining. If she took 2 hours to reply, at least she respects you enough to take time composing a reply. I saw this cute girl and wanted to ask her out. As soon as I said hi to her I knew the only way to get out of it was to ask for her number. She was flattered but said no. Mad props though. When I was on my way to see a girl I had been talking to online for 3 months who lived on the other side of the world, just put all of my eggs in one basket and said frick it. The crap. No going back now, feeling really hit when the plane took off. That girl is now my wife. Sometimes you just gotta go for it. Midway into my first, not for beginners, ski slope, I could stop and chicken out, but I continued. It was freaking amazing. Went for a second time. Got injured 10 seconds before the end. Still, worth it. Getting admitted to a psychiatric ward at 17. I was going through an emo phase. Dyed my hair blue black. Started listening to loud edgy music. Wore skinny skins. The whole shabam. I always was a shy, sheltered kid that didn't have many friends. School was my #1 priority and had daily classes from the morning till late in the evening. I was also secretly gay, living in a deeply religious family. Video games were my only outlet. When the school stuff started getting harder and demanding more and more of my time, it got harder for me to juggle between getting my homework done and getting my dopamine rush. Suddenly, I started wondering why I put that much effort into school in the first place only to get mediocre results. My grades weren't bad, probably the equivalent of a B+, but not getting an A still made me feel like I had failed. I was also routinely bullied, so I figured that, if my grades fell, I would make myself less of a target. To cut to the chase, I tried to make myself more likable and got acquainted with emo and alternative culture. Boy, did my mom not like that. She started wondering why her son turned from a nerd to the circus act, straight up asking me if I was doing drugs. I wasn't. BTW, but it didn't matter. She figured there's something wrong with me, so she started dragging me around from one psychiatrist to the other. When the doctor eventually said that there's nothing wrong with me and it's just normal teenage hormones, we would immediately visit another doctor to get a second opinion. Eventually, she booked an appointment with the head of a psychiatric facility, for which he paid an exorbitant amount of money, around $200. which was 4 times larger than the hourly rate of the previous doctors. He asked me a few questions, most of which were answered immediately by my mom, and after about 5 minutes gave me a depression diagnosis. He said that I'd need to start taking antidepressants and that I'd need to stay in a psychiatric ward for a week, so that they can monitor my body's reaction to the medication and do further tests. Now I wasn't planning on going through with it, but after some pressure I started believing that maybe he knows better and there's actually something wrong with me. So I went along. This screwed me up in more ways than I care to recall. I eventually shifted from diagnosis to diagnosis and all kinds of different meds. The crap I saw during my multiple stays there scarred me for life. I'm almost 28 now, still living at my mom's house. I've been off the meds for around 7 years. I recently got admitted to a uni to study art abroad. I'm planning on leaving after this summer. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.